Welcome to What to Do When, a podcast from real lawyers with real perspective, where we explore a variety of legal issues and scenarios. Each week, we focus on a new topic and discuss what to do when and if any of these legal scenarios ever happen to you or a loved one. With over 40 years of combined legal experience, our hosts offer their unique perspectives and insights on a range of real-life legal situations.
Hi, and welcome back to another podcast with Critzer Cardani here in Richmond, Virginia. What to do when?
What's on the docket for today?
What to do when avoiding a juvenile DUI.
Whoa.
That's
Baby DUIs, we call them sometimes. And I think the key is to realize that it's completely different in the sense of a adult DUI, and it's 21, not 18, and there's all these things that people need to know. But as a parent, when your kid starts to drive, they really need to understand what this means. So if you're driving a car and you're under the age of 21 and you have any intoxicant in your body whatsoever, the amount doesn't matter. If it shows up, you're under the influence for driving. So it's a real misnomer. Most kids think they can go to a party and drink a beer and drive.
right. Sure.
So, you're driving home and you get a flat tire, or you run a stop sign and the cop pulls you over. All of a sudden you're like, well, I didn't drink, I only drank a beer.
Or someone hits you, right? Sometimes the part of the process of helping our teenagers think through what could the consequence be. It's not, I don't trust you to get from point A to point B in a safe way. The question needs to include, well, what are you going to do if somebody rear ends you or somebody doesn't stop at a stop sign and hits you? Then what sort of consequences are you looking at?
Yeah, this is really important because I think because we're so ingrained to the 0.08 kind of mentality,
Right.
that most people think they can, and parents will drink a beer and drive, and it's usually no big deal because they're way under the limit. And they're
Usually, right.
You're not impaired in any way. So kids take a cue from us sometimes, but they've got to learn and have to realize that the standard for them is so different, that drinking a beer and driving, or smoking marijuana, which seems to be like the new thing for beer.
Using a vape pen with CBD, not CBD, but I guess the THC oil, the marijuana stuff in it.
Yeah. And so, there's lots of ways they can test you, but if it's in your system and it registers, basically, I guess is the real way to look at it. I mean, we get into all the science of it and all the things, but we're not here to do that. What we're trying to tell you is that when it registers, you're in trouble.
Well, how do they, can we address that? How do you mean register? I mean, we know a DUI can be, I guess, field sobriety test if they do that on juveniles. I don't know, you can talk about that, but a breathalyzer or a blood test. But what about, so talk about that first, and then we'll talk about maybe the other intoxicants and how they measure those.
Well, the bottom line is they're going to have to do, most of this is going to be like a hospital kind of blood draw. Okay. You can still do the breathalyzer at a police station and blow into a breathalyzer. What people don't understand is the field sobriety test. I'll handle that real quickly. Field sobriety tests are the tests they give you on the side of the road. One of them could be the breathalyzer, the portable breathalyzer that they use, which is to a level inaccurate, and they can't use it as evidence against you. That's why you should never agree to do that. The field sobriety test on the side of the road, or the agility test, you follow a pen with your eyes, you walk 10 steps, heel to toe, and all those things. Those are all indications of your ability, of where you are if you're impaired. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. But what we're really talking about is you're driving, you had a beer, you are completely unimpaired, and they pull you over and they smell the odor of alcohol and they push through and decide to arrest you because you go, oh yeah, I did have a beer, like every kid does. And we teach our kids to be honest, but there's a difference between being honest and telling on yourself. You don't have any obligation to tell on yourself. You have an obligation to, be honest, but not in that context. When a cop asks you, have you been drinking, you have every right to say, with all due respect, I'm going to talk to my parents and a lawyer before I answer that question.
Sure.
And that's always the answer, because no matter what you say in that situation, you're not helping yourself.
Well, because understand this, that situation is likely going to get you maybe to a hospital for a blood draw. Okay. If you say, no, I haven't had anything, then they're going to take the next step and try to figure out whether you have. If you say, yes, I have, then certainly you're going to go. So no matter what you say, it's not going to help you.
No, and you just, some officers may be nice enough to think you're not impaired and decide that not to do anything. But the bottom line is you're putting yourself at risk. And the best thing you can do is make them prove their case. That's their job. They have to do the work to prove it. You don't have to help them in any way, shape, or form. So you be polite. You hand them your driver's license. You hand them your registration. You show them your insurance. And that's the end of the conversation. And you don't have to answer any of the other questions. But they're going to try to find out if you have anything in your system. And they do that, if it's alcohol, they can take the breathalyzer at the station. But they have to arrest you to do that. And if that doesn't work and it's some other intoxicant, they may take a blood draw or a urine screen or whatever it may be. And you remember this, folks. I don't know that we figured out in Virginia exactly how we're handling marijuana, quite frankly. But it stays in your system 30 days. Normally, that's the average.
Right.
So think about that. You smoked at Billy's 28 days ago and you're driving, they pull you over because you got in a wreck. Are you under the influence? Probably not. Are you legally responsible in the sense of a DUI, driving under the influence? Potentially. So that's what we're trying to say. That's why I had
certainly
this
in possession. Right?
Yeah, you're certainly in possession because possession means it's in your system. What we're just trying to help you understand is this is a process that you have to think through. We as parents have to instruct our kids because even if our kids are really good kids, they may have a beer and drive. And the consequence of that beer could be a loss of license, 6-month loss of license, all those things that can happen in a DUI. So, and it's a misdemeanor charge and, there's just a lot of downside to it. And if you don't know, then you'll get pulled over and you go, oh yeah, I had a beer. I'm totally fine.
Well, and I think it's important to, our kids learn by our example.
Yeah.
And they are far more likely to do what we do than do what we say. And that includes maybe you're on your phone when you're driving. What do you think they're going to do when they're behind the wheel? They're going to think it's okay. They're going to think they've mastered it like you think you have. And if you have taken them to a family get-together or you've gone out to dinner, maybe at a restaurant, had a glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine, beer, a couple of beers, and then the whole family gets back in the car and it's time to go home and it's really probably not a big deal. You're probably not impaired depending on your metabolism. But what example are you setting for your young people and what are they going to expect to have happen when they become drivers? They may know in their mind, well, I shouldn't do that, but they're going to follow the lead and the lead of the people that are in their lives. So if they go to the party, or God forbid, they're at your house and they sneak a drink and then they leave, okay, and maybe they're just going for a drive up to the pool in the neighborhood and somebody pulls out in front of them or somebody rear ends them or something happens that isn't even their fault, and here comes the local police, they're looking at a much bigger consequence than they had originally anticipated. But what sort of consequence, what does that mean? So if, let's say this 16-year-old, 17-year-old has left a party, left home, whatever the case may be, they have a license, right? They're not under a learner's permit, so we'll just presume that they've already been licensed. And it's determined that they have some sort of alcohol in their person. What consequence could that be if they're found guilty?
Well, they potentially face technically jail time.
Okay.
They potentially face, or detention time, and if it's a juvenile,
sure.
Obviously. They potentially face a loss of license. Their insurance rate's going to go up. What was the other one? Sorry.
Is it going to be a DUI?
It's going to be a DUI. It's going to be a misdemeanor. All the things that are bad about a DUI for an adult. And again, this is why it's so important, because when you get a DUI an adult, you've actually done something wrong. I mean, and again, you've done something wrong because you're not supposed to drink until you're 21. So
right.
That's the point. But my point is, you may not be impaired in the least, but
sure.
Because you have something in you, you're going to be charged with a DUI, which makes you on the same level as the person who drank 5 beers and got behind the wheel.
Well, and there's a potential that impacts college admissions.
All those things, yeah.
Because is it sealed, Scott? Does a DUI get sealed in a juvenile record?
Well, somebody smarter than me has to figure that out sometimes, because sometimes a juvenile record is completely expunged, and with this new expungement law that Virginia just passed, there's a lot of quirks to it yet. I think eventually, yeah, it's not even going to be on your record, but
as of today, it's a risk, and even if it's not on your record, every college admissions form is going to ask for convictions, misdemeanor convictions, even traffic infractions. And I know it's been a minute since I was in college, but they all ask those questions: traffic infractions and criminal misdemeanors or felonies. And that's it. And if you lie about it on your admissions paperwork and then they find out, doesn't matter how they find out, if they find out, then the consequences get even bigger and bigger and bigger.
And I think the problem really becomes when you become 18 and then you're 19 and then you're 20 and you're almost 21. You don't think about it anymore. You're an adult, you're off to college, and you really don't think about the fact that you're still under 21. And we understand what goes on in college. We're not naive, but the point is our kids have to know what the real consequences of that are. So they make decisions based on facts, not based on some fiction. And I think, I can't tell you how many kids I've represented in my lifetime who are 18, 19, and 20, almost 21, who are getting charged with a DUI for almost nothing, in the sense that they had a beer, maybe had 2 beers over a 10-hour period, just enough to even dink the
barely
machine,
register. Mm-hmm.
But they're still under the influence. And I've seen judges handle it in a whole bunch of ways, and that's why you need an attorney. You need some experience in juvenile law. You need somebody who knows what they're doing and knows how to work the angles that may come up. But the bottom line is there's quite less angles when it comes to a juvenile DUI than there are as adults.
Scott, one more question on the topic. So we've talked about marijuana and the potentials there, alcohol and the potential DUI there. What about prescription medication? And does it make a difference if it's prescribed to you or you've been given some from a friend who it's been prescribed to?
Yeah, that's really tricky, but I'll answer it this way. Under the influence is under the influence. And if it's a narcotic, you're probably under the influence. And if you give it to somebody else, you've probably just committed a crime of distribution. So when you have your Adderall and you give it to Johnny, you just gave away
a controlled substance.
A controlled substance, and that's going to be possession or the intent to distribute or distribution. And those are big, heavy charges, and those are no fun for anybody.
And they're expensive.
And most people, again, this is something we do as adults. Say, I've never done this. But I know people who, you have back pain. I have a couple back pills left over from when I had back pain.
Sure.
Do you want to take one? It might help you. You just committed a crime. And, we do those things kind of naturally. We don't think much about it, but then our kids are watching us. So Billy's in the car with Johnny and he's freaking out. Why don't you just take one of my Adderall and calm down?
Sure.
But they're under the influence. And that's what we're trying to get here. You don't want to be under the influence of a narcotic. You don't want to be under the influence of marijuana. You don't want to be under the influence of alcohol. But remember, a baby DUI, you don't really even have to be under the influence. It just has to be in your system. So if it registers, you're getting charged with a DUI.
And whether that's blood, breath, or
urine.
There we go. Blood, breath, or urine.
So 3 takeaways real quick are, number 1, any is any. So if it's in your system, it's in your system, and you are subject to the DUI laws.
Under the age of 21.
Under the age of 21. And we are talking about possession. I know it's not really part of it, but possession is in your system. A lot of people think, well, I had a beer here, but it means in your possession means in your system. So, and that's a whole nother, we can talk about possession laws, but I just wanted to bring that up, that realize that you had a beer, it's in your possession, it's in you.
So you could even get this, pause real quick. Does that mean you can get a charge for possession and a charge for a DUI?
Yes, you could. I guess that's very, very charge. Very true. Very charge. And the other thing is, excuse me, remember, you have no obligation to prove the case against you, so don't do it. You're not as gifted as you are. There's some people get out of everything. I get that. I had a friend who got out everything. Some people would say I got out everything, but I would say no. But anyways, the bottom line is there are people who are very gifted and they know how to work people and they get away with stuff, but I don't trust that. And I know cops know how that works. They're doing their job every day.
Right.
The best thing you can do is just say, you know what? I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk to a lawyer. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And move on. Give them what they need. License, registration, proof of insurance. That's it. That's all you have to talk about. Leave the rest to us. Leave the rest to us.
So thanks again for listening to our podcast on juvenile criminal defense. You can find other juvenile criminal defense podcasts on our website. Tune in to wherever you listen to your podcasts and be looking for our next juvenile podcast, juvenile criminal defense podcast, where we talk about possession and what that means. We've talked about a little bit today.
And we're going to try to get Will out here for that one.
We're going to try to get Will back involved. So be looking for him. Thanks again. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of What to Do When. For more episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, and we encourage you to check our archives to listen to previous topics. Tune in next week for a new episode and some fresh perspective from Critzer Cardani.